I don't know when exactly I became the guy everyone relied on, but it happened long before I noticed. One day you're just doing your job, and the next you're the person who covers the shift when someone calls in sick, who fixes a client mess at 9 p.m., who smooths things over when your manager screws something up and needs someone calm to stand next to him. I didn't volunteer for that role. It just happened. And for years, I didn't question it. My manager, Chris, used to call me his right hand. He said it jokingly, like it was a compliment, but it felt more like ownership wrapped in praise. He'd pat me on the shoulder and say, "Couldn't run this place without you," which sounded nice until you realized he meant it literally. He relied on me for every gap, every drop in the schedule, every emergency, and I stepped up every time because I thought loyalty still meant something in workplaces like ours. For a while, I believed we were a good team. He handled the upper management nonsense, and I kept the department from falling apart underneath him. But the longer I worked with him, the more I noticed he never protected me the way I protected him. If something went wrong, he'd say we, but if something went right, it was I. I pushed that aside because I liked my coworkers, and I liked being good at what I did. Pride can blind you like that. The cracks started small. He'd forget to sign off. Over time, he'd personally ask me to work. He'd tell me to finish a report he forgot, then forget to mention it was due in an hour. He'd let someone else take credit for an idea I pitched in the meeting because it made him look collaborative. It was frustrating, sure, but manageable. And every time I thought about saying something, he'd have a bad day or drop some line about corporate breathing down his neck, and I'd swallow it. But the moment things shifted for real wasn't about a project or a deadline. It was about a coffee. A stupid, harmless coffee. It was a Wednesday morning, messy, cold, the kind where everyone comes in 5 minutes later than usual, pretending it's the weather's fault. I stopped at the cafe across the street and picked up drinks for the team. Not a big gesture, just something to break the tension in the air. I even got Chris the caramel latte he liked, the one he always said was too sweet for men but perfect for stress. I put the tray on the table in the break room and went to clock in. Not even 5 minutes later, he walked in holding the cup like it was radioactive. "Did you order this with oat milk?" he asked. I said yeah, because that's what he always ordered. He exhaled sharply through his nose, like I'd just sabotaged his career. "I told you yesterday I'm off oat milk. I'm cutting calories." He said it loud enough that 2 coworkers turned. I apologized, offered to replace it, and he waved me off with a dramatic, "No, it's fine," which obviously meant it wasn't. He dropped the cup in the trash full and walked out. That would have been the end of it, except 30 minutes later, he called me into his office like I'd committed a policy violation. He sat behind his desk with his arms crossed, tapping his fingers like a disappointed parent. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said. "You're slipping. You're distracted." "Because of a coffee?" I asked, careful to keep my voice level. "It's not the coffee," he said, which meant it absolutely was. "It's the pattern, the lack of attention to detail. I need you focused. I can't have mistakes from you." Mistakes. That word hung in the air like it had weight. I sat there, trying to trace what pattern he was seeing. I was the one who fixed mistakes. I was the one who stayed late when he forgot something. I was the one who had his back during the audit last year when his numbers were off. But he stared at me like I was the problem, like he needed me to be the problem. And it hit me, not all at once, but slowly, like cold water creeping up your legs, that he wasn't under pressure. He was panicking. Corporate had been pushing him hard for weeks, and instead of dealing with his own mess, he was looking for a place to redirect the fallout. And I was convenient. I walked out of his office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Distance. Not anger, not hurt. More like a quiet click somewhere inside me. The kind that happens when a door you didn't realize was open finally shuts. The rest of the day went on as usual, but I noticed everything differently. He asked me to resend an email he'd lost. I did it without the usual no problem attached. A coworker came up to clarify a task Chris assigned her. I noticed he'd given her the wrong instructions. At lunch, Chris walked by my table and made a joke about my morning meltdown like it was funny. I laughed because it was easier, but the laugh didn't feel like mine. The truth? A small part of me already knew where this was going. I'd supported him for years, shielded him, covered for him, kept the department afloat, and he still found a way to twist a harmless moment into a performance issue. And when a man like that starts rewriting history, he's already planning his exit strategy. I just didn't know yet that I was part of it. By the next morning, I could tell Chris had already rewritten the coffee incident into something bigger in his mind. People like him don't let small things stay small. They turn them into evidence. Tiny bricks they stack until they can climb over their own guilt and point downward at someone else. And I was starting to see just how long he'd been collecting bricks. When I walked into the office, he was already pacing near the conference room, holding a stack of papers like they were proof of a crime. He didn't say good morning. He just jerked his head toward his office. Close the door. I followed him in, feeling that faint heat in my chest that comes before irritation burns into something sharper. He dropped the papers on his desk and tapped the top page. We need to talk about your recent performance. I blinked. My... What? He didn't look up. You've been inconsistent, disorganized. I've had to fix too many of your mistakes lately. Mistakes. There it was again. The word he'd chosen to build a whole fantasy around. What mistakes, Chris? I kept my voice flat, because men like him hear calm as threat. He finally met my eyes. The delayed vendor files, the missed update on the Monday report, the incorrect inventory count last week. All things he did, all things I fixed, all things he now felt comfortable assigning to me because they happened near me, adjacent to me, or in the same building as me. That's not accurate, I said quietly. It is from where I'm standing, he replied. But you were the one who... He raised a hand, cutting me off. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to address a pattern. The last time I heard that tone was from a cop giving a warning to a teenager outside a movie theater. It wasn't authority. It was performance. I leaned back in the chair. Chris, you know those weren't my errors. That's not how corporate sees it. There it was. The truth. Someone upstairs had finally noticed the gaps he'd been covering with charm and excuses, and he needed a buffer. And I'd been the perfect buffer for years. Compliant, competent, quiet. But that was the moment I realized he wasn't trying to correct me. He was trying to justify something he'd already decided to do. He sat down, folded his hands, put on the expression people use when they're about to pretend this is harder for them than for you. I think it's best if we part ways. No preamble, no warning, no documentation, no performance review, no write-up, no coaching plan. Just a sentence tossed across the table like a receipt. You're firing me? I asked, because I needed to hear him say it directly, without euphemisms. For the good of the team, he replied. I almost laughed, but the laugh got stuck somewhere in my chest. Over what? A latte? He frowned like I'd said something absurd. Don't reduce this to that. I'm not reducing anything, I said. You haven't given me a single factual reason. He sighed dramatically, rubbing his temples. I'm not going to debate this. The decision is made. HR will finalize the paperwork. Something inside me went still. Not angry, not hurt. Just still. I stood up. He mistook the calm for acceptance. You'll get your final paycheck Friday, he added, pretending to be gracious, and I'll tell the team you left to pursue something better. I don't want this to look bad for you. For me? He didn't want it to look bad for me. The slow, controlled anger that followed didn't rise like fire. It folded into place like armor. I walked out without a word, without slamming the door, without giving him the satisfaction of a reaction. As I passed the open office area, 2 co-workers glanced at me with the kind of look you give someone heading toward a verdict. I didn't stop. I didn't explain. I didn't break momentum until I was outside, standing on the cold pavement with my box of desk things and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I sat in my car for a few minutes, hands still on the wheel, not driving anywhere, just letting the truth finish assembling itself. He didn't fire me because I was slipping. He fired me because he was sinking. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have smiled. Because Chris had spent years being messy. Messy with paperwork, messy with compliance, messy with expense approvals, messy with every guideline corporate ever handed him. And I was the one who cleaned every mess he made. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one burying them. As that thought settled, something unclenched inside me. Not revenge, recognition. I opened my email on my phone. I typed a single line to HR. I would like to schedule a meeting regarding my termination and the conditions surrounding it. I hit send, and that was the second I stopped being the person who protected him. That was the second I stopped carrying his weight for him. That was the second I stopped being anyone's shield. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, I realized something painful and liberating all at once. I'd spent years saving someone who never once tried to save me, and I wasn't going to make that mistake again. HR scheduled the meeting for the next morning. A polite email, neutral tone, no hint of what they suspected or didn't. I knew how these things usually went. They'd listen, they'd take notes. They'd thank me for my time, and nothing would happen because managers protect managers and everyone else is replaceable. But that assumption held one problem. I wasn't walking into that meeting empty-handed. I spent the night sorting through years of emails, messages, receipts, and logs. Not looking for dirt, just looking for the truth. And the truth had a habit of leaving fingerprints everywhere. Over time, he told me to clock out for budget optics. Inventory counts he instructed me to adjust, so his quarterly numbers looked cleaner. Vendor payments he delayed until the last second, blaming me when they escalated. Compliance reports he begged me to rewrite so his errors didn't show. It wasn't malicious. It was lazy. And lazy catches up eventually. I didn't exaggerate anything. I didn't twist anything. I organized everything exactly as it happened. Chronologically, concisely, professionally. Not a revenge folder, a clarity folder. By the time the sun came up, I had a timeline that didn't need drama. It spoke for itself. In the HR office, I sat across from a woman named Laura, who had a calm expression and a legal pad she didn't actually write on. Chris wasn't there. That was my first sign something had shifted behind the scenes. She folded her hands. Thank you for coming in. Before we begin, I want to understand your perspective. I nodded, opened my folder, slid it across the table like it was just another Tuesday task. This is my perspective. She blinked once. Then she started reading. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then she asked for a highlighter. Then she stopped pretending to be neutral. Why haven't you brought any of this to us before? Because I thought supporting my manager was part of my job, I said. Turns out it wasn't. She didn't smile, but something in her posture changed. I need to escalate this immediately. She stepped out of the room. It took less than 5 minutes for the second shoe to drop. 2 people came in, regional HR and someone from compliance. They weren't friendly. They weren't warm. They were efficient in a way that only matters when someone knows they're about to dissect a problem from the inside out. They asked me to walk them through the timeline. Not emotionally, mechanically. I kept it clean. Dates, instructions, screenshots, receipts, directives, outcomes. No editorializing, no bitterness, just facts. By the time we finished, they weren't asking me questions about me anymore. They were asking questions about him. How long has he been adjusting these reports? Were these instructions verbal or written? Did he ever acknowledge the policy conflicts? I answered everything, calmly, clearly. No exaggeration, no vindictiveness. Just the truth he'd spent years hoping would stay buried under my silence. When the meeting ended, regional HR exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. We'll need to open a formal investigation. You may be contacted again. I left the building feeling something unfamiliar. Steadiness. Not triumph. Steadiness. Like I'd finally stepped out from under weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Compliance. They needed clarification on a few details. Then another call. Then an email. Then another. Each one smaller, more specific, narrowing in on things only Chris could have done. On Friday, I drove past the office to drop off a final form HR requested. I didn't intend to go inside. I didn't want spectacle. But when I stepped into the lobby, I saw him through the glass wall of the conference room. Chris. Pale. Still in his suit, but rumpled in a way I'd never seen. Papers spread out on the table in front of him. Regional HR sitting across from him. Compliance beside her. The door closed. His eyes wide, focused on a printout I recognized. The overtime logs he told me to clean up. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't arguing. He looked like a man trying to negotiate with gravity. I didn't stay to watch. I just handed the form to the receptionist and walked out. That evening, one of my former coworkers texted me. They pulled him out of a meeting today. Took his badge. He's suspended, I think? Suspended. A soft word for someone who was already falling. I read the message twice before answering with a simple, "Thank you for letting me know." And for the first time in months, I slept without my jaw clenched. The next morning, I woke up early, sat on the porch with coffee, and felt something I hadn't felt since long before my termination. Room in my own head. He'd fired me thinking he'd solved his problem. Instead, he'd exposed every crack he'd been hiding behind me. And the best part? I didn't ruin him. He ruined himself. My folder just showed them where to look. 3 weeks after that porch coffee, I got an email from HR with no subject line, just my name. I almost didn't open it right away. I let it sit there for a minute while I finished what I was doing, because whatever it wasn't going to change my day. That was the first real sign I'd moved on, even if I hadn't admitted it yet. When I finally clicked it, the message was short. The internal investigation regarding your former manager has been concluded. We would like to schedule a follow-up conversation with you regarding next steps. No details, no outcome, just a door half open. I went in the next morning. Same building, same elevator, same hallway. But I didn't feel like an employee walking into an office anymore. I felt like a man visiting a place he used to live. Laura from HR met me at the door this time. No legal pad, no forced tone. "Thanks for coming in, Grant," she said. "Let's talk in here." We sat in a smaller room than before. No windows, just a table, 3 chairs, and a quiet that felt less like tension and more like reset. She took a breath. "I'll get straight to it. The investigation validated your documentation. There were multiple violations of policy and procedure confirmed on your former manager's part." Former. She didn't emphasize the word, but it landed anyway. "He's been terminated, effective immediately," she added. "We've implemented corrective measures in the department and escalated some structural changes to regional." I just nodded. No smile, no satisfaction performance. I'd already had the private moment of watching him through glass. I didn't need another. "We also need to talk about you," she continued. "Your record here, outside of his statements, is clean. More than that, your colleagues spoke very highly of you. They described you as the person who kept things running." That part stung a little, only because I knew how true it was. "So," she said, folding her hands, "we'd like to offer you a position." I raised an eyebrow. "The same one I had before?" "Not exactly." She slid a printed offer across the table. "This would be a senior coordinator role, reporting directly to regional management. Different reporting line, different oversight, higher pay, clear boundaries. You would not be under the same structure you were before." I read every line, title, salary, reporting structure, responsibilities. It wasn't a bandage. It was an acknowledgement. "I want to say this clearly," she added. "This isn't hush money. If you don't want to come back, we'll still note your cooperation on record. But if you do, we'd like to build with you, not on you." For the first time in a long time, I felt something warm that wasn't anger or resentment. Not gratitude exactly, just respect, edged with caution. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "Take your time. We'd rather have the right yes than a quick one." On the drive home, I didn't blast music or rehearse conversations in my head like I used to. I drove with the windows down and let the air do what it wanted. Coming back wasn't a question of pride anymore. It was a question of alignment. Did I want to go back into the place where he'd tried to break me? Or did I want to walk back in as proof he hadn't? I sat with that for a couple of days. Talked to a couple of people who actually mattered. Friends who didn't turn everything into a spectacle. Nobody told me what to do. They mostly just listened and asked the right questions. Finally, I emailed HR. "If the role still stands as written, I'm interested. I'd like to discuss a few boundary points before I sign." They replied in under an hour. "Absolutely. We'll schedule a call." We went over everything: hours, authority, reporting lines, escalation paths. I asked for written clarity on things I'd once assumed would just work out. They agreed more easily than I expected. When I finally signed the offer, there was no swelling music, no dramatic moment. I put my name on the line, saved the PDF, and went to make dinner. The simplicity of it felt like the best part. Going back wasn't about proving anything to Chris. He was gone. It wasn't even about proving anything to myself. It was about not letting one insecure man rewrite my relationship with my own competence. The first day in the new role felt clean. Some of the same faces, same building, but a different office, different badge access, different meetings. People greeted me with a mix of curiosity and relief. No one said what they were thinking out loud, but their eyes did. "You're back. You're higher. He's gone." At lunch, one of my old coworkers sat across from me, nervously folding her napkin. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "It feels better with you here." "It should feel better because of the structure," I corrected gently. "Not just because of one person." She smiled. "Maybe, but some people make a difference." I didn't argue. Some truths don't need correcting. In the weeks that followed, I saw the ripples of what had happened without having to wade into them. Processes changed. Approvals got tighter. HR showed up to more meetings. People were more careful with what they signed and what they asked others to do. Once, in a quiet moment, Regional pulled me aside and said, "If something like this ever starts happening again, to you or anyone else, don't wait years. You don't owe anyone that much silence." "I know," I said, and this time I meant it. The funny thing about revenge is that people imagine it loud. Shouting matches, courtroom speeches, public humiliation. Mine wasn't loud. It was a folder of facts, a few honest conversations, and a decision not to carry someone else's consequences anymore. He fired me, thinking he was removing a weakness. What he actually did was remove his last shield. I still drive past the old building sometimes on my way somewhere else. The glass doors look the same. The lobby looks the same. But the weight of it is different. It doesn't sit on my chest anymore. It's just a place where I work, not a place that owns me. At home, my life is quieter now in ways that matter. I don't answer emails at midnight just to prove I'm loyal. I don't jump when my phone buzzes. I don't interpret every message from a manager as a test of my value. I go to work, I do my job well, I document what needs documenting. I speak up when a line is crossed, and when I clock out, I actually leave. Sometimes people ask me if I ever feel bad about what happened to Chris, losing his job, the investigation, the termination. The way his name is probably whispered in hallways now is an example. I don't celebrate it. I don't replay it. I don't need to. I supported him for years, more than he ever deserved. I covered for him until covering for him meant drowning with him. When he finally pushed me over the edge, all I did was step aside and let the consequences land where they were supposed to. That's not cruelty. That's balance. In the end, he fired me for the dumbest possible reason and thought that was the end of the story. It wasn't. It was just the last thing he did with power he never really earned. The rest of the story was simple. I stopped giving my loyalty to someone who treated it like a disposable tool and started giving it to myself instead. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like the smartest decision I'd ever made.